United overperformed last season. Overperformance or not, Chelsea always win. Is it Skinner's tactics? Is it personnel? Let's get into it. Starting in the 7th minute with Manchester United attacking down their right-hand side channel. Chelsea's 2-3 or 2-4 being able to set up after United's attack breaks down, with Leopold and Cuthbert as the double pivot, or alternatively and more typically with Cuthbert as the number 6, allowing Leopold to position between the lines, creating more confusion for Zalem and the United centre-back. Speaking of, I'd like to just highlight that whilst Leopold is deeper here, positioning between the lines along with James and Fischl, and United typically setting up in more of this 4-1-4-1 shape, meant that Zalem would have to cover a lot of ground in trying to defend the space between the lines from those 3 attackers. Next, note the similarities in the role being played by Fischl to Sam Kerr. Please have a look at the video analysing the Hacken-Chelsea match, where we see Fischl dropping to link play with her defenders, acting as a focal point to lay off for her number 8. Focusing on James a little bit more, she was given the licence to roam all across the pitch, looking to try and disrupt Manchester United's press and combine with those wide midfielders in the half spaces. Quick note on the movement of Chelsea forwards, noting here how as Fischl drops simultaneously, we've got Canarid looking to take advantage of the space left in behind. And similarly, we would see the same on the far side, where if Fischl dropped, we'd see Russon running in behind. Throughout, Manchester United's defence suffered, but I'd say especially so once James moved to a centre-forward position, helping to set up a box midfield with Nusken, Leopold and Cuthbert. Fortunately for Manchester United, they regained possession in this 2-3-2-3 shape versus for Chelsea what fluctuated between a 4-2-3-1 and a 4-4-2. Note how Ladd and Toon are looking to try and work the space between the lines to provide short passing options for the defence. Unfortunately, a lack of incision and Chelsea's quite good defensive posture, being relatively close to the players that they're defending, made United really struggle. On this occasion, leading to United retreating to their goalkeeper and switching play out towards their right-hand side, whilst we get to see Chelsea flex from that 4-2-3-1 to more of a 4-4-2 here, with James having stepped off Zalem. Just as earlier, Ladd and Toon looking to try and help in that space between the lines, looking to try and help overload the wide space. Unfortunately, Riviere doesn't really have a left foot to take advantage of the overload, which allows Chelsea to be able to play some tidy 1 and 2 touch through Manchester United's low commitment and low intensity counter press, allowing Chelsea to show us that 2-4 shape again, with James between the lines. Unlike the previous example, Canarid is the one linking up with the defence on this occasion, with Fischl positioned to expose that space that Canarid has created by her movement. Moving on a little bit, we can see that Chelsea's 2-4 at times moves to more of a 3-2 shape, with Niamh Charles able to push higher up on this left-hand side. Next, note Ladd's position. She's super important to United's defensive solidity because A, she needs to help Toon pressure Cuthbert and Leopold, and then B, she needs to support Zalem in defending that space between the lines. Okay, so United have their 4-1-4-1 set up. JC is doing her job in trying to harass the defenders. Unfortunately, Garcia has a dilemma in the wide space. She's expected to stay relatively narrow here with Toon to make it difficult for Chelsea to run straight through the centre or pass directly into Ruson's feet. And of course, on top of that, staying narrow, she also doesn't want to drop too early for the reasons just mentioned, despite the fact this is creating a positional advantage for Niamh Charles outside of her. Unfortunately, there's no great answer here for Garcia or Riviere, and so Charles is able to position quite high. Riviere had to stay narrow to defend Russon initially, which then gives Charles more time to think when she receives the ball. Anyway, I want to get back to Zalem and Ladd. Firstly, Ladd is out of position now because of this transition in the left-hand side wide space relative to James. Yes, initially she was staying closer to Leopold to help with the press, but as the situation has changed, she's now technically out of position. Simultaneously, Zalem is also relatively out of position. I think specifically Zalem has a few defensive weaknesses. The biggest one is that she's just relatively slow. The next is that she's not strong in a tackle. And then lastly, she just doesn't seem to predict well enough the areas of concern which would make up for her being slow. And so we get to see the symptom of Manchester United's pressing and defensive issues in James receiving the ball centrally here with Fischl in close proximity, essentially 2v1 versus Turner. So this is our symptom, but the actual problem occurred well before this. Okay, moving on to the 11th minute with Chelsea, again in that 2-4 shape, or arguably a 3-2 shape with Charles allowed to push a bit higher. And continuing from the previous example, Manchester United trying to set up that 4-1-4-1, and unlike Chelsea's man marking, we see that United still are struggling to close down these distances. And just as in the previous example, the problem is not committing to the man marking, and so the symptom here is that it gives Charles enough space to be able to escape in combination with Russon down the left hand side, allowing Fischl then to take advantage of the vacated space left by Riviere, just as we saw with the early example of Fisch or Canner taking advantage of the space left by the other. Fortunately for us, we get to see the issues of Manchester United's midfield again. Firstly, with Ladd out of position, she's better defensively and more defensive minded than Zelen, which likely is what drove her reluctance to man mark tightly higher up the pitch. And then next we have a look at Zelen, whose position again is relatively poor. One could say that she's trying to defend the space between the fullback and centre back. However, she's over covering, giving one of the most dangerous players in James even more space. And then to compound things, Toon hasn't covered for Ladd or Zelem's mispositioning. Fortunately for United, James decides to pass back, re-establishing Chelsea's 2-4 shape, which allows us then to get to see how Leopold can break from her partner Cuthbert and move into more of an attacking role, supporting the wide midfielder near side. Lastly, I thought this was a nice scenario just because it showed James having the flexibility to drop from that high position and support the link-up play, the creative side of the game. Next, in the 43rd minute, I specifically wanted to look at this scenario because, one, United love to attack in transition, be very dynamic, typically in this 2-3-2-3 shape, where the near side fullback, as we see in this case with Riviere, combining with Garcia, getting involved in the attack. But I specifically wanted to have a look at JC's contribution and somewhat her philosophy relative to that of her teammate with regards to chance creation. So firstly, here, note JC's reaction to Zelen's long ball. Of course, JC has come from Barcelona, and so this long ball is antithetical to her understanding of the game. In my opinion, you've turned what was 100% possession in Manchester United's favour into, at best, 50-50. Typically, long balls advantage defenders because they're likely to be set. If not, due to the distance, they're able to recover. And of course, the goalkeeper can become involved. It's not to say that long balls aren't useful. They are, but they should be used sparingly and to keep the opponent honest. Fortunately for us and Chelsea, they defend this initial long ball, allowing us to see JC weave some of her magic in this right hand side where she loves to flow into, allowing Garcia to play more of a centre forward role. I accept that there is jeopardy in JC dribbling 1v2 here, but my focus is more on the final assist. Also, I presume that JC would prefer if Manchester United could get into these attacking positions through tidy and repeatable passing patterns rather than less repeatable dribbling. I felt the need to highlight this given my comments in an earlier video analysing United versus Villa. Next, in the 57th minute, James was moved to centre forward, although she was supported in this role by Nusken in that box midfield. Unlike Kerr here, James as centre forward adds more control rather than, I'd say, more chaos through attacking impetus, as one would expect Kerr would continue the attack more often than James would here. This allows Chelsea to set up into that 2-4 or 2-3 shape and lets us see Nusken pushing into that second centre forward position, as well as also James fulfilling the demands of a centre forward in trying to stretch the play. And then United, in the last 10 minutes, trying to salvage something from the game, moved to their plan B, William. Here we see her as the focal point of Mary Earps's long ball or clearance. She also made for a great focal point from United free kicks, corner kicks, throw-in, creating a platform for them to create from between the line without the need for the more intricate, deeper passing, which is exactly what we get demonstrated to us with this free kick. Out of possession, United stuck with that 4-1-4-1, where she now partnered Nelson. In this role, she did a great job harassing Chelsea's midfield and defence, as we get to see in this example. Just as in the earlier example, the near side United fullback still tried to support the wing play, where Manchester United weren't trying in that 2-3-2-3 shape to get their wide midfielders or their forwards in behind directly. And the reason I wanted to use this scenario was because we have great examples of Williams' contribution, her involvement, starting with United being extremely direct, Williams being the focal point of another free kick, and then also contesting a corner kick. I shouldn't really address this, but I am a referee sympathiser, and so I feel I have to address the penalty kick claim, especially given it was 2-1 and United were gaining a little bit of momentum. Okay, so United are building up in their typical 2-3 shape. They managed to find Toon between the lines, and her pass to Galton running from out to in is salvageable. Not good, salvageable. This is why I think this actually was a penalty kick. This gives you the best example because you get to see Galton's arm end up behind her back, which is unnatural in running. Unfortunately, due to human biomechanics, we simply are just unstable if our arms do this sort of motion. Fortunately for Lawrence and defenders everywhere, it looked super innocuous and so typically goes unpunished, which is why top teams tend to pull arms rather than slide tackle, which is a lot more likely to be judged as reckless. So pulling an arm like this has huge benefits. You stop the opponent and you rarely get punished. Even with VAR, I wouldn't expect this to be spotted because refereeing is subjective and football is messy. And that's to say, even if I was the referee, I don't think I would have given this, despite thinking actually you have impeded and prevented Galton from a goal scoring opportunity. Anyway, with that, I'd love to know what you think about my assessment of the penalty kick, as well as also the analysis of the match. So leave your comments down below. If you've enjoyed the video, consider sharing it on social media, subscribing, and with that,